And it appears I am live. So, even though my channel doesn't really get a lot of attention and has been pretty much dormant, I decided I wanted to chronicle my issues with the last episode of Game of Thrones and touch on some of my issues with the series in general. So, I'm going to get right into it, try to keep this short. Fortunately, I don't have anybody participating in the chat right now, but who knows? Maybe it'll happen later. So anyway, I've gone online and I've looked at some other people and some of the things that they said about the show, and I agree with a lot of what I've heard, and disagree with some things that I've heard. So I'm going to start from the beginning. So I've been invested in Game of Thrones for quite a while. I actually was introduced to Game of Thrones while it was already going. I saw the episode of the Battle of Blackwater Bay without any context at all. I hadn't read the books or anything like that. And a friend of mine came over, showed it to me, and I was immediately hooked. It's a great episode, really interesting episode to come into the series on. And what ended up happening was I binged watched everything else. I mean, I stayed up all night watching the rest of the show, getting the backstory from that point, and it was really crazy to me. Um, I'm still not over Ned Stark dying, you know. And that's really, to me, what defined the show. Um, they've already been talking about and analyzing this episode about, oh, well, the great thing about Game of Thrones is that it subverts your expectations. Well, it does. There's no doubt about that. But it does it in a pretty specific way and a horrifying way. Okay. Um, we're not talking about good things. We're talking about bad things. That's the thing about Game of Thrones is it rips your heart out. Like I said, I'm still not over Ned Stark. I'm like, they really did that? That really happened? As I said, I hadn't read the book, so I couldn't see it coming. I didn't know that was going to happen. But that's the way that Game of Thrones has always kind of subverted your expectations. You become very invested in a character, a good character, or even a bad character, because many of the villains in Game of Thrones have also died. But you become very invested in the character. It's a great character, and then they take him away from you. I would say that for instance, on the villain side, when Tyrion killed his father, that was huge. That was definitely, yeah. They subverted my expectations. I didn't think that Tyrion would go that far because to some extent he seemed to always want approval from his father, and for him to kill his father was crazy. Plus, his father was such a great character. He was such a great villain. There was such a great depth to him. You know, he was a rich man. He was a very competent, smart man, and he was also a good tactician and general and soldier. You know, he actually led his troops on the battlefield, so he was a formidable enemy. So when he went away, it was like, oh, now what's going to happen? And of course, we know what happened. The series, once it got off of the books, and I do know a lot about the books from spoilers and things like that. The series lost itself because it ran out of material from the books and then became progressively more Hollywood. It's almost as if you can see, all right, we have some notes from Martin, from the author of the books. So we kind of have an idea of the direction of where this is going. There were some good moments. Battle of the Bastards was a great episode, great battle, great scene. But as the series progresses, you kind of realize they're running out of more and more material. There's more and more delays between seasons. The seasons get shorter. I knew we were in trouble in season 7. It just became so Hollywood. I mean, for anybody who's watched the show, whatever happened to Dorne? Dorne is still the most untouched of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. Still, nothing happened to the army of Dorne. The Sand Snakes, who nobody cared about, who were terrible in the show, they got annihilated. But the army of Dorne was still sitting in Dorne. What happened to them? poof, just gone. That kind of stuff. That kind of really crazy, stupid Hollywood stuff where there's no explanation. There's just, oh, we wrote them out. We showed you we got rid of the sand snakes. We got rid of their leaders. So that means their whole army and society must have just collapsed, even though they were completely untouched, never attacked by the White Walkers, never attacked by any of the other armies of Westeros. Obviously, not attacked by Danny, by Danny, by anybody. But they're gone. So I think we knew we were in trouble quite a while back when it comes to this show and the quality of the writing. But a lot of people, they're still supporting it. They were still into it. I'll give one thing about season 7. The special effects were really, really good. I make the joke with my friends and people that other fans that watch the show and say, well, obviously they got rid of all the writers and hired a bunch of new ones or something like that, which I know they didn't do. But obviously the writing was decided. They decided the writing was not important anymore, and they decided, hey, let's just let the special effects crew do their thing and go wild. And there were some very good effects in season 7, no doubt. So that kind of leads me directly into what I saw last night and what an abomination it was to me, and how much it just really makes me feel betrayed, even though I kind of knew this was coming. Because, like I said, the writing has become progressively more and more Hollywood. And by Hollywood, what I mean is Hollywood basically, they look at the lowest common denominator and they write to it. Okay. They look at the stupidest, silliest trends and they write to it. Whatever's popular at the time. It's a story not meant for the ages. It's meant to bring in a quick buck and then be gone and disappear. It's not meant to be a classic story. That's how Hollywood writes. I'm sorry, that's just the general way Hollywood writes. Because we all know the scenes we've seen a billion times. Okay. Now, with the last episode of Game of Thrones, right off the bat, it had a huge problem in terms of lighting and organizing the scenes. And I've heard this from other YouTubers that I was been listening to or watching, and that's one thing that I think is spot on. I had real difficulty understanding what was going on because the lighting was so bad. Now I stream HBO, but still, tons of people stream HBO, and the fact that and I was watching it on my television, I wasn't watching it on my computer. I had and I have a 50-inch television. I had real trouble understanding. I wonder if you can hear that. My my Alexa's going off because I changed the keyword. It's that's embarrassing. But anyway, I don't know if you could hear that, but I could hear it very prominently. My Alexa just went off because I used the keyword of well, I can't say it right now. Uh, I used the Star Trek keyword for my Alexa. So anyway, nobody's watching this anyway, so who cares? But here's the thing: right off the bat, there was a visual problem, in my opinion, with the episode and throughout. I had found it very difficult to follow the action. Those of you that could, good on you. But I found it very difficult, jumbled, and just poorly shot. I mean, just plain and simple. The lighting and the actual choices they made and how to film and set up the scenes were bad because I there were many times where I was like, I don't understand where that person is. Like there was one point where I thought Grey Worm, when the Unsullied were making their stand to cover the retreat, which I actually thought was really good. I mean, I liked the Unsullied a lot, and I thought that was really cool. There was a point where it seemed to me that Grey Worm was in the castle, and then all of a sudden I realized he wasn't in the castle. He was just kind of in the doorway. And I became very confused about what he was doing. So there was a lot of that for me where I was very confused on the position of where the characters were. And that takes me out of the story. It takes me to the action where I'm just like, okay, is Grey Worm running away? What is he doing? Like I didn't understand in that specific scene. That's just one example. The whole tactic of the Night King, which was a good tactic to use the storm, really screwed up the scene even more, especially with the dragons and everything like that, because it was very hard to see. Um, Doomcock, who is a YouTuber that I really like, he pointed out I had the exact same experience with the dragon fight, where I thought the ice dragon was killed, and I actually thought that um, John's dragon was killed as well. And I thought when we saw the dragon again, I thought it was the new ice dragon. It was John's dragon who had died and now been resurrected when the Night King resurrected the new dead, all the dead of the forces of what of gosh of Winterfell. And I thought that was I thought that was the that now we only had one dragon left. Question mark, because the last time we saw Danny's dragon, he was covered with the undead. So I was really confused. So I just want to address that it's like it just wasn't shot very well. And so that's a major criticism. Like last season, I would have given all the props to the uh, the DPs, the director of photography, camera crew, the special effects crew. At least season 7 was filmed really well. I did not think that this last episode of this is what season 8 now, season 8 episode 3. I did not think it was filmed well. It was very confusing. It was too dark, and they just didn't film it well. They didn't set it up well that you understood spatially where people were and what they were doing and what they were contributing to the fight. It was just a big mess, just a big mess. And we've seen Battle of the Bastards. Battle of the Bastards was a big mess, but it was very coherent. You understood exactly what was going on. And here's a funny thing, too. All right, so fans have ripped apart um, Battle of the Bastards, even, which a lot of people think is the best fight in Game of Thrones. I still think Blackwater is, because I guess I have an attachment. That's the way I came in, and I thought it was just brilliant the way it was done. A lot of people like Battle of the Bastards. They think it's the best battle. And of course, you have people now saying, this new one is the best. But anyway, before it was Battle of the Bastards. One thing that everybody universally pretty much criticizes Battle of the Bastards is Jon Snow's tactics, because he gets drawn in and he does a cavalry charge when that clearly was stupid, because he doesn't have anywhere near the horses that the Boltons do. And there's no way that he can win a cavalry charge. He has very few cavalry. His army is mostly wildlings. So what little cavalry he has is extremely precious, and he wastes it almost immediately. And of course, that also screws things up because it takes the archers out of it. Once you mix the forces together, the archers can't do much unless you're going to shoot at your own men. So tactically, people said, "Man, Jon Snow was a real idiot." But of course, my interpretation was he lost his cool. He did something stupid, obviously. Well, in this last episode of Game of Thrones, they do the exact same thing on a much larger scale. They take what is arguably their best fighters, at least their most numerous best fighters, because you could argue the Unsullied are their best fighters, but there are far less Unsullied than there are Dothraki. It's a Dothraki horde, okay? That's why it's called a horde. There's tons of them, right? So they take their most numerous quality fighters, the ones who are on horseback, thus the most mobile, which is a huge advantage over the Night King's army, because most of the Night King's army is always shown to be on foot. We do see sometimes that the Night Walkers themselves are on horseback, but I don't recall ever even seeing one of the actual undead, the others, whatever you want to call them, on a horse. They're always walking or running. They're pretty fast, but they don't have horses. So the mobility factor of the Dothraki is a huge advantage. Now, I don't want to get too into tactics and stuff like that, but bottom line is that's not the way you use cavalry. Okay. Even if you have a horde, you don't use your cavalry that way, because they knew from the beginning they were outnumbered. Okay. But they didn't know exactly what numbers they're facing. They just knew they're outnumbered. So a frontal charge of the Dothraki with the lit up swords, which a lot of people like the lit up swords. I thought it was such a gimmick. You know what I mean? It was such a gimmick. Even the Red Witch coming in was such a gimmick. The Red Witch ended up doing nothing. Nothing she did was effective. Lighting up the Dothraki swords didn't do anything. Didn't do anything. They got slaughtered. But why wouldn't you use your cavalry the way it's supposed to be used, which is to guard the flanks and also to try to outflank the enemy, try to envelop the enemy, hit them from a different side, that kind of a thing. That's how cavalry is actually used in real warfare. Um, the frontal charge was just horrendously stupid. So the tactics really upset me that they were just dumb. It didn't make any sense to do that. And the inclusion of the Red Witch, and then of course they retreat and they light the trench on fire. The witch does, which again proves to be completely ineffective and doesn't do anything. Realistically, all the Night King had to do was just wait at that point. They're all in the castle, just starve them to death. That's how siege warfare actually worked in real life. 9 times out of 10, they just sat there. And the Night King has all the time in the world. Night King has been waiting, what, like 1,000 years? What's another, like, what, 30 days? Actually, depending on their water supply, it could be like a week and they're all dead. Because they even talked about they don't have enough supplies for these people. They just don't. The army is too large. Just wait them out. Still, for action purposes, I get what they did. They just piled the dead bodies, made the dead body bridge, and they go over. So I'll stop there with the technical aspects, the tactics, and things like that I had a huge problem with, and get right to the meat of it. Okay. And this silly idea that people have where they say, well, they defy expectations. They were just defying your expectations. No, no, this is just bad writing. This is bad writing, and this is pandering and fan service. And I cannot stand all the fan service and pandering that's going on with so many really good properties have a good story, and they ruin it with fan service. So in this case, from the very beginning, there's a sort of theme of Game of Thrones that goes beyond the fictional world and the the cool factor, I guess, if you will, of Game of Thrones. There's a theme, and people have talked about it. Okay, and the theme is pretty much this: you have a bunch of people who are supposedly the leadership of Westeros. These are the leaders, the politicians of Westeros. Very much like our own politicians in many ways, quite frankly, in terms of the way they deal, in terms of they even have things like the Iron Bank that talk about like the corrupt financing and wealth and power and how it all works, and that basically the best people are not in charge. Robert was a very flawed person. He was in charge basically because he was a military person. And then later on, the Lannisters take over, not because they're the best, but because they're the wealthiest and the most ruthless. That's why they're in charge. It's not because they're the best. So the issue becomes, it's called Game of Thrones. That's just the first book. But the series is called A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, Game of Thrones, yeah, we all love it because of the intrigue and the drama and the soap opera type nature of the show. That's great. That's fine. But there was always a bigger theme, and it was from the very first scene. Remember, the very first scene was not um, was not it wasn't bickering over a table or something like that, or plotting, or Cersei drinking her wine as she watches someone die. It was the Night's Watch, which had become pathetic at that point. But they were the ones who were actually guarding against the real threat on the wall, the threat that everybody forgot about, which is this army of the undead, the Night King, the Night Walkers. This was the real threat. But what ends up happening, of course, is all the big lords, all the big families, who control all the big armies of Westeros, instead of dealing with that threat, are fighting amongst themselves, making themselves weaker, and killing each other off. And of course, we love that. That's what makes it entertaining. But the overall theme was supposed to be about this external threat that nobody's addressing. And people have made analogies to things like climate change. You could easily make an analogy to immigration, things like that. There's all sorts of things you can make an analogy to. Weapons of mass destruction. We find out that the White Walkers are actually weapons of mass destruction. They are the fantasy equivalent of autonomous drones who have turned on their masters and now are destroying everything. Okay, there's so many themes there of this sort of apocalyptic nature of this threat. That's a threat to the entire world. It's not even just a threat to Westeros. Eventually, they will encompass the entire world in darkness, despair. They will so many different situations, like I just talked about: climate change, immigration, weapons of mass destruction, even the growth of AI. There's so many things you can insert there that are things that could actually destroy our world, and we may not be properly addressing. Okay, we may not be properly addressing these things, and so it gets you thinking. And that's one of the great things about Game of Thrones. This has got me thinking. I guess it doesn't have that same resonance with other people. So that theme was thrown away in the last episode. It was completely thrown away. We are now told no, the big apocalypse was not what this story is about. What this story is really about is the petty politics of all these stupid houses and these royal people and the drama and the soap opera. That's the real story. The showdown between Cersei and Dany. And what is Jon going to do? Because Jon is actually the rightful heir. Who cares? I mean, seriously, it is such a bad soap opera at this point. Such a bad soap opera at this point. And it just comes to the point that it's like, who care? Why do you care? It really makes me wonder, why do you care? Okay. The big threat was the destruction of everything. Now it's over now. It's over. It's done. Who cares? It's done. That's not what the story was about. The story was about the petty bickering between houses. And I just think that's a terrible, horrible message. It's a terrible message. It's an absolutely terrible message. So I have a big, huge problem with that. Killing off the Night King was wrong. They should have been all decimated, and to the point that they're like hiding on the islands and trying to figure out what to do. But that would require some really tough writing, because if they were in that situation, that would have been a great thing. If they had gotten to the point where they were on the islands, like they could have been on Bear Island, they could have been on the Iron Islands, they could have been on Dragonstone, right? And that's all. And there's just a handful of them left, and they're trying to figure out what to do because they've lost Westeros. I mean, that would have been great, right? But no, we didn't get that. No, no, they took him out at Winterfell. They took out the Night King at Winterfell. I mean, that's just terrible, and it's terrible for the theme, and it's terrible for the story. It's stupid. It's just silly. So that's one of my major problems is we lost the theme of the whole story. Now it's just about petty politics and fan service, quite frankly, because everybody's like, "Oh, I love Cersei. Oh, I love Dany. Oh, I love Jon." Everybody now, "Oh, I love Arya. Arya is the bestest thing ever." Um, and I will say I do have a problem with Arya killing the Night King, very simply because obviously Jon was supposed to do it, and now Jon has basically done nothing. People criticized him during the Battle of the Bastards, and I tried to defend him. Now I'm just like, nah. Now apparently Jon Snow's just fluff. He's just there to add a little bit more drama. He had no special purpose. He had no special destiny. He gave up being king of the North. You know, yeah, he's just whatever. Who cares? You know what I mean? Who cares? Who cares? And Jon was my favorite character. The Night's Watch and Jon, that was my favorite thing. I love the idea of the bastards on the wall, these poor guys that have just been left out there, even though they're the ones facing the real threat all by themselves. And all these petty idiots are just bickering among themselves, trying to get their throne. Um, so I hate that. So I will say that I don't like that Arya killed the Night King, and I don't like the way she killed him. The way she killed him didn't make any sense. It made zero sense. I don't know anybody. How can you argue that it made any sense the way Arya killed the Night King? Literally, his entire armies around him, including the other Night Walkers, who are all extremely tough, and she just pops out of nowhere. I'm sorry. That's terrible. That's terrible writing. That's terrible writing. That's 100% fan service. People like Arya. It's fine. I like Arya too. Arya is one of my favorite characters. But even the method is stupid. Doomcock on his channel pointed out that she could have maybe like hidden herself. Maybe she could have disguised herself as one of the undead, or maybe she could just disguise herself, which would have made sense. And she snuck up on the Night King. At least that would be more plausible. It would make more sense. But ultimately, I don't care because they ruined the theme of the entire show. And I'm getting over going over the time I wanted to go. It's getting too long, and I'm just ranting. So, but I do want to emphasize that because a lot of people aren't talking about that. We've lost the central theme of the show, and we've gone from the big picture of global catastrophe, total annihilation, apocalypse to now, oh well, who's going to be on the throne? You know, um, yay, which is important. I'm not saying that wasn't important. I'm just saying to me, it should have just been whoever was left. That's the way I would have ended it. It's like, oh, this one person is left. That would have been spectacular. I think it would have been gut wrenching if you saw all your favorite characters die except for one. And I would have loved a little twist. Like I would have loved to see like Sir Davos, the Onion Knight, be the king at the end, like because he's the only one left. You know what I mean? Something crazy like that. But they won't do something like that, especially because he's a man. And I won't even go into that anymore because that gets into a whole another can of worms. But they are not the way they treated the men on this show is pretty pathetic. I mean, the men didn't do anything. The only man who the only man who did anything was Jorah, who was actually one of my last favorite characters, and I'm mad that they killed him because Jorah actually did protect Dany. She would be dead if not for Jorah. Jorah protected Dany when she needed him. So at least his death actually served a purpose. So I'll give him that, even though I didn't want to see Jorah die, especially in the context of my second big point, which is none of the throne contenders died in this episode. Not one. So you talk about the drama, because now it's obviously all about the drama. We didn't get one throne contender to die, because none of the people who died were throne contenders. Theon was not a throne contender. Okay, Jorah was not a throne contender. None of these guys could have been on the throne. Not a single one of them that actually died. Not one. Not one. There was no foreseeable way for any of the people who died to become the king or queen of Westeros. So that's my second big huge gripe about this episode that a lot of people that they're not talking about is it's just ridiculous that nobody of true importance or consequence in terms of the game, which now we've been told the game is this what the story is about. It's not about the hordes. It's not about the apocalypse. It's not about uniting together and facing a huge threat from the outside. No, it's about bickering among ourselves. That's what this story is about because that's entertaining. So the bickering, that's what's important. And none of the main bickerers, the people that actually could maybe have a legitimate claim on the throne, none of them died. Not one in this episode. And they killed like 6 characters, right? 6 characters that, people to some degree care about, but none of them have the huge fan base. And that's when I talk about fan service. This is all fan service because most of the characters that die don't have a huge fan base. They just don't. Mormont, is it Lyanna Mormont? She probably has the biggest fan base of the people that died, and she's just kind of a viral thing. She was never meant to be important in the story. Even the showrunner said she was only supposed to be in one scene. The actress did such a good job, they kept bringing her back, and people liked her, because of her attitude. And I won't even touch her and her death and all that kind of stuff. That is what it is. I don't hate the character. I do think it's silly sometimes because, talk about size and weight and how important that is in fights like this. Like they realistically showed something with Arya. For a long time, Arya was running away because her physical size would not allow her to be very good in a fight like that, where you're dealing with a horde of people that don't care if they die, they're already dead, and they're just piling in and they're pushing on you. You have to be big in order to push back. And they showed accurately that Arya ran away. She was running away and hiding because it would make sense in a fight like that. She just wouldn't be very effective the way that she fights. That was established before, but now all of a sudden, you know, she went into super stealth ninja mode, disappeared, and got past all the undead and all the White Walkers. I mean, that's really ridiculous. Come on. I mean, it wasn't just the Night King there. All of his main guys were right there, and she just out of nowhere. But like I said, that's not even the main thing for me. And again, I'm going over my time. I'm ranting too long. Nobody's even participating in my chat, but I just want to emphasize those two things: the loss of the theme, the fact that we were apparently misled on the quality of the story, that it's not about the external threat, it's not about uniting against that external threat and dealing with it and all the consequences of that, of not dealing with it. Think about that too. What are the consequences of not dealing with these threats, these big external threats? No, ultimately, all the power players, they're all fine. They're all still there. It's all about the petty politics and the drama and that stupidity. Um, that's terrible. And the second point being that even with the drama, nobody significant died. So even if you're using the rules of the show, they're not following their own rules because it's supposed to be about the drama, right? Well, nobody of consequence died. Nobody. Nobody that died was of consequence. So that's it for me. I went way longer than I wanted to. I'll try to keep working on this, but that's all. Anyway, thank you. And if you like this, please hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. I would love to get some comments. I'll keep this up here and maybe I'll get some comments. Maybe somebody else will tell me the error of my ways and address some of my critical thoughts in a way that will turn me and I will actually enjoy the next episode, which I don't even want to watch the next episode. Like I said, this has really gone bad since season 7, and it just got a lot worse. All right, so I am signing off.